From the Tulsa Community College Thomas K. McKeon Center for Creativity, welcome to another Tulsa Town Hall Forum. Our topic today is alcohol, and while no one is advocating a return to the days of prohibition, alcohol has become a serious problem in our community, and we've gathered some experts to discuss the issue. Joining us is the mayor of Tulsa, Dewey Bartlett. From the University of Tulsa Medical School, Vice President Dr. Jerry Clancy, and from a Tulsa restaurateur, Elliot Nelson, and from the Able Commission, charged with enforcing Oklahoma's liquor laws, Eric Smoot. To help facilitate the conversation, we have some of Tulsa's top-notch reporters with us. Joining us is Julie Delcor, an editorial writer from the Tulsa World, and Emery Bryant from the News on 6. Let's begin, if we can, just kind of framing the issue, Mayor. What is the issue that needs to be addressed concerning alcohol in Tulsa?
Well, it's a variety of issues. What really caught my attention, John, is a few years ago when we began a series of groups such as this to focus on systemic societal problems that are plaguing our city. We started off with prescription drug abuse. Then we followed that up with a focus on domestic violence. And in those two, we found that there's a lot of tie between alcohol abuse. And in so doing, we found out that the county of Tulsa and the city of Tulsa in particular is really leading the pack, unfortunately, in abuse of drinking alcohol. Binge drinking, for example, has gotten out of control. And it's not just covering a particular part of our city, it covers the entire city. But in some parts where people might think it's okay, it's not okay. It really is a problem. We're seeing a lot of accidents as a result of this, a lot of problems with domestic violence, additional drug abuse, but it's something that starts at home. It starts in the families. It starts in the schools. And it really does hit us as a society. And until we as a society understand the significance of the problem and start dealing with it, it'll continue to plague us. But we must have this conversation.
And I would assume, Dr. Clancy, that there's also a medical component into it. Tulsa has fairly poor health grades. Does alcoholism and alcohol play into that?
It does on really two levels. One level is that several individuals actually use alcohol to self-medicate for a depression or anxiety disorder. On the other hand, those that overuse alcohol themselves, the alcohol itself can lead to a depression or anxiety conditions as well as a whole host of medical issues. It's really from head to toe as far as how it can impact you with overuse of alcohol.
Julie?
Well, I was wondering, this issue has been around forever. I think it precedes the prescription drug use, and for as long as I can remember, we've talked about tackling it. What do you think can come out of the town hall that might be different?
Well, I think it will be publicized, and people will begin to see and hear the seriousness of it. We've seen a positive effect on the previous town halls that we've had. By getting the right people together to talk about the issue, to not only just discuss it, but also come up with ways to deal with it, but have follow-up meetings, which we've done. And we've seen for example, in the prescription drug abuse problem that we have had in Oklahoma, but in Tulsa in particular, Oklahoma is still having increasing problems with it, but we in Tulsa, as a result, I believe, of the conversation, we're now seeing a drop in that problem.
Are you going to bring the schools into this?
They will be invited to it, probably not every school, but certainly representatives of the school. But it's something that we really, in my view, need to focus with the families, the adults that are really enabling the problem to begin in the family unit itself.
Well, I was wondering, each of you seem to represent a point of intervention in this problem, and by the time it gets to your jurisdiction, Eric, it's probably out of control. But in the medical community, you see this early on, the warning signs, and as a restaurateur, you know the customers that might have a problem there. Is there something that you guys would like to see government do to assist you? This is not something that, I know no restaurateur wants to see a person stumbling out of their establishment. So is there something, some point that's missing that the government could help you do, that families could help you do, that you want to get out there?
From our end, when we apply for a liquor license with the Able Commission, we accept responsibility to serve alcohol in a responsible manner. And that's, part of our pact to have that license. And so I think for us, it is more a matter of training our employees and making sure people are responsible. And as you say, we can identify maybe when there are issues with certain customers. And for us, we need to be responsible enough to intervene and not let that kind of behavior continue, certainly not in our establishments. And I think that we've seen over the years, we are very much a community invested company. We want Tulsa to be a better place to live. That's our chief goal as a company. And so part of that is being part of a healthy community. And if our customers aren't healthy and they aren't coming in to have a drink in a social manner that is part of maybe seeing friends or family and maybe continuing a work day or celebrating a birthday or something like that, that's to us what we're in business for, is to help Tulsa find a place to I think the third place is always the Starbucks thing you hear, but we want to be that good, healthy place to enjoy something responsibly, and that is something that we always try to teach our employees.
I see the role of government also as an educator of the community. And when the mayor speaks, when the council speaks, when our commissioners speak, that carries a lot of weight. And this community just went through something pretty extraordinary over the past 10 years, in that we've lowered the life expectancy difference between North and South Tulsa from 14 years to 11 years. And it started with us being honest about the really bad data, and then educating people that we need to take action. And we need to be honest about these numbers that we have right now regarding alcohol, and start the conversation on what are our interventions. And part of that is educating parents that serving alcohol at home to your kids is a very bad sign to your kids, that it's okay to drink in all sorts of situations. In my field, we need to have a much more strong awareness in the medical field that an underlying cause of alcoholism can be depression and anxiety, so refer so that people can get treated for that. And it starts with that conversation and that awareness, bringing it up a level as far as what's happening in our community.
It seems to not nearly have the taboo that smoking has taken on.
Yes.
It still has a positive impression in the minds of a lot of young people, I think. Is that what you guys see with young people? Do you see that?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, we have associated sports and alcohol together. And virtually every football game that we watch in the stadium and on TV, we are bombarded by commercials around that alcohol and sports go together. And so it very much normalizes that being healthy and fit and exercising and alcohol go together.
Do you know of any areas, states, cities that have made significant inroads into this problem?
It really is city by city, and hats off to the mayor. We are one of those cities that actually is making a difference in these complex areas. I think we all see at both the national and state level that they're struggling at that level, and in part that's because people in the cities know each other, and when you know each other, you can work on solutions together. There's not a one-size-fits-all type of approach. It really needs to be city by city. And
what about rural versus urban?
Again, my approach would be, what are the community anchors even in that urban area? And oftentimes, as you started off speaking, it is the schools. The schools are the community anchor that everybody rallies around.
Eric, there's an effort afoot in Oklahoma to what some would say modernize our liquor laws. And as a state employee, I know you may not want to get into that, but is that going to help or hurt problems if alcohol is made available at the supermarket, or you can get cold beer from a liquor store, strong beer? Is that going to make the problem worse, in your opinion?
Well, and right now it's available, whether we call it low point beer or strong beer, however that works out. I mean, and that'll be up to the legislature to decide that. And so, we're not going to get too far into that. But at the same point, I mean, it's out there. kids are getting it. We're seeing kids with it no matter where it's available at. So that's not really what we see as an issue. But what we do have, and what we have seen as a law enforcement issue, is that we have to think about how we do it. We have started education campaigns for schools. We've started education campaigns for businesses. We've realized that we just can't arrest our way out of this problem. Being out there doing the DUI checkpoints, being out there just trying to deal with the people that are committing the crimes, it's not enough. It's not preventing people from continuing to drink and drive. It's not preventing these crimes from happening. So we are now doing some education campaigns. We're doing some awareness campaigns around drinking and driving because we have to do something else. Obviously, what we've done so far hasn't worked, and so we're expanding our efforts also on the education side.
How are the younger kids getting the alcohol? Is it the old fake ID? Is it raiding mom and dad's liquor cabinet?
We are seeing some fake IDs, that type of thing going on, and that's happening. Don't get me wrong, that's happening a lot. But the majority of kids getting alcohol are getting it at home in social environments.
Wow.
You know, there's a large number of people that adults, parents, that think that, well, we know it's a problem, so we'll serve liquor at home to our children and their friends, so now they're in a controlled environment, and they think that's okay. But that, in my view, really encourages the problem and enables the drinking, because those children will bring friends over, then they'll start drinking. And then at the end of the day, end of the night, they get in their car, they go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that causes a serious problem. And then that just spreads. So the adults, those who think they're doing their children and they're being safe, really are not, in my view. They're really enabling the problem. And that, in my opinion, that's what is the basis of so much of the problem where it does happen. It's enabled by the adults, by the parents.
Elliot, you look like you want to chime in on that.
Just worried about my own kids.
Well, as a parent, is that a huge concern, especially in your business?
Oh, I mean, in our business, we are very diligent about checking IDs and making sure that people are of age and acting responsibly. So I think to that extent, hopefully not. Hopefully our employees are doing their job. We do extensive training on that. And I think just as a parent, I mean, you hear those things and you think back maybe to your own youth and just, hope that you can teach children to be responsible and to grow up and make good decisions. And, it's that's all that's going through my head in terms of when I hear that go on. But I think, it's, Tulsa as a place, we have challenges in that we are very spread out. We don't have real urban centers, and we don't have the best public transportation. And so, in many ways, a city like this is often more at risk to those bad decisions because of those things. So,
would better public transportation, mass transit type stuff help ease some of the DUI?
It certainly wouldn't hurt it. I think it would, absolutely. If not only for younger people, but everybody. And if people are drinking and the designated driver is not available, well then if mass transportation can take the place of that designated driver, hooray. Mm-hmm. So it would certainly be an attribute. One thing that Eric talked about, the education process, it brings back a reminder that when we educated children about the dangers of smoking,
right,
and about the dangers of drug abuse, in the schools, in the younger with the younger students, it really had a very positive effect. It worked. I think if we had that same type of outreach on alcohol abuse and the problems with alcohol, I think that we would see the same positive effect.
I don't know about the younger numbers, but I know overall, hasn't DUI fallen over the last 15 years?
It has fallen. What we have seen, though, is the numbers in Oklahoma have not fallen as much as they have in some other states. So, we have seen a fall nationwide. And so we've seen a fall here, too, but not as dramatic. But I think, like the mayor said, some of those things we don't have, like mass transportation and some of those things, might limit that number a little bit. Yeah. But we're definitely making a decline. We're seeing a decline for sure.
Does Uber make a difference?
Oh, I think it would. I mean, anything that we can do to keep people from going behind a wheel when they've had too much to drink, and even if they don't think they've had too much to drink, but having Uber and mass transit, et cetera, it certainly it helps save people, no question. But it still doesn't solve the problem.
No.
The problem is, in many times, people don't see drinking a lot of alcohol in the same regards as taking a prescription drug overdose or of getting themselves in a situation where they start beating up somebody. Alcohol can contribute to that problem. But when it's done properly, it's a socially accepted form of recreation. I think our restaurant and bar industries do a very, very good job of policing the problem. I think Elliot makes a very good point. They teach their employees well of how to do it, but at the end of the day, it's a situation where the adults at home need to be in a position to understand that this is a contributing problem if they enable it to happen, in my opinion.
If someone is picked up now for DUI in this city, is there any, other than them going to jail, is there any intervention made systemically to say, okay, this person has a problem, let's see if there's any assistance for them, or see what their track record is, anything like that?
There isn't now. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mayor. When you get a DUI, if they take their license away, if they have a driver's license at the time, and on the administrative side, they're supposed to have a assessment done as part of that process to see what level they're at and whether they need some more done, whether they need just like a 10-hour DUI class or whether they need to go to an inpatient class. How well that's done, how often those are done, we don't know, but that is supposed to be part of the process when you get a DUI on the administrative side.
Okay.
There are models out there for heroin in Quincy, Massachusetts, where the police, rather than taking people to jail for a heroin overdose, actually immediately take them to treatment. And I know the mayor has talked about that with a different county unit or city unit, and we just haven't got there yet.
We will.
Yeah.
I think this is a program where not with DUIs, but when someone is drunk, but they're not driving. If they're driving, it's a whole different situation. But if they're simply had too much to drink or obviously intoxicated with something, instead of throwing them in jail, have an inebriate facility to where they are put in a facility and allowed to sleep it off essentially. But then when they wake up, they're told that they're in a facility and they're evaluated and given some information that if they do obviously have a problem, then down the hall you can talk to some people about this problem and they will help you. It gives a person an opportunity to make a decision on their own that they do need help, but don't have to worry about having a record. But they can get themselves in a better position where they can get rid of the problem. By simply having a record and going through the judicial procedure, sometimes it really doesn't have a good effect. But when they are in a controlled environment where they aren't fearful of things, but then they can realize that they've got a problem, they've got to deal with it, then we can accomplish that. Oklahoma City's been doing this for about 25 years, very successfully. And we wanted to use that as a good example. And
Now, we didn't have good luck 10 years ago. It died for lack of use. What will be different?
well, at that time, in my opinion, the police department, the people that were that were the first observers, they really weren't given good information about what they needed to do and why it was beneficial, not only to them, but also to the person that was being picked up. That's changed now. And the benefits are very obvious. What Oklahoma City's done, the benefits are very obvious, not only to the police department and the taxpayer, but especially the person that's picked up. And that kind of information now the police department understands, and they would use it. For example, when a person is picked up and they're put in jail, there's several hours that usually elapses while the police officer is out of service because he or she has to deal with the booking process at the jail. With an inebriate facility, it takes about 15 minutes, and then they would be back in the street doing their job and not have to babysit somebody that's having a problem.
Dr. Clancy, you've mentioned a couple of times depression as a factor leading people to use alcohol. How does, or does it, I guess I should say, Oklahoma's poor mental health capabilities play into this?
Well, very much so. When we look at the numbers of demand for services versus what the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services can do, we're meeting about a third of the need out there. There are huge numbers of people that just can't get into treatment. If you look at my field of psychiatry, about 2% of a medical school class goes into psychiatry as their specialty field, but when you look at the general population, about 30% of the population are suffering from some type of mental illness at any one time. And so you've got 2% of the physicians and 30% of the population. So we've got to figure out a better way. And that includes psychiatrists playing a different role rather than just trying to see people one-on-one. The psychiatrists need to be able to help the nurse practitioners and the physician assistants and the family medicine doctors extend that psychiatric expertise. I don't think we'll ever graduate enough psychiatrists to do the work. We've got to really think of a team approach for mental health in this state.
Okay. Eric, how close do you work with the individual restaurants like Eric's and I know Eric, you have or Elliot, you have several different restaurants. How close do you work with those individual restaurants? I know sometimes you have sting operations, but that's not what you prefer to do.
Now, we reach out also for education, to educate servers, as well as the stuff we offer to do for the schools and everything else. We reach out for education, and that's a newer thing that we're trying to do, but we realize we have to. Like everyone else, we're doing more and more with less. And so we'd like to believe that on the education side, we can do more. You can only check so many businesses. You can only do this much with this much manpower. So the more we can reach out on the education side, the more we can be helpful, the more we can try to do it that way, the more we're going to get done, the more we're going to accomplish, the more we can work together. Because the goal has got to be to make a change. It's got to be to make a difference. And we feel like we can make a bigger difference in education than enforcement. Now, sometimes education doesn't work, and we have to do enforcement. But if we can do it through education, we want to do it that way.
In your experience, by the time someone comes to the attention of law enforcement, are they at the beginning of the problem, or is their life out of control and this is just when they get picked
No,
up?
by the time they make contact with us, the sad thing is, the statisticians tell us that the average person drives drunk 80 times before they get arrested the first time for DUI.
Wow.
So if you do something 80 times, right, and nothing ever happens, how am I going to convince you that you're in danger of being caught? So the biggest problem we have with driving drunk or anything else is that there's no consequence, right? You don't feel like you're going to get in trouble. You don't feel like, there's any consequence for that. So if I say, if you drive drunk, you're going to get arrested, but you've done it 79 times and you've never got arrested before, you really don't feel like the danger's there.
Is Operation Aware still up and running?
Yeah. As far as I know. And it's been very successful, very, very successful.
Right.
But it's a type of education process, again, with our younger students, that it works.
Right, like middle school.
Exactly. I mean, it really does work, and that's that capability. It's interesting when looking at how society, how we excuse alcohol abuse, driving while drinking, and that sort of thing. In many of the European countries, especially in Northern Europe, I mean, if somebody is picked up and they have alcohol on their breath, they're thrown in jail just like that. I mean, there's no excuse, and they really are imprisoned. I mean, it's a very, very bad offense, and so people pay attention there. But here in the United States, it's a little different deal. You might get arrested once, maybe twice, and then the third time you might be in trouble. But there's ways to sort of accept it until we really, I think, get very serious about addressing the issue. Then we probably won't see a big effect. So we really have to understand it.
I know in Canada, when you cross the border, that's one of the first questions they ask you, and you better not lie, because they follow up on checks.
Wow.
Not from personal experience, but
Yeah, they ask if you've
but
got
they
anything
do
in the
ask.
car.
Yeah.
Is Dr. Clancy, now if someone gets medical attention, is that usually of their own choosing, or have they been drug in there kicking and screaming?
We see both, but for the most part, someone comes to the realization that I've been drinking too much and I'm depressed, and then they come for treatment. Our estimates are that about a third to almost half of individuals with substance abuse, including alcoholism, have an underlying mental disorder. And so it's a huge problem. And one of the important treatments for their substance abuse problem is treating the underlying depression or anxiety condition. And if you lower the intensity of that, the demand for drinking alcohol or using prescription narcotics is much, much less. You decrease the demand. And we've had a country that has worked very hard for the past 40 years with a war on drugs. But we have not paid near enough attention to a war on demand, and can we decrease demand for drugs and alcohol at those extreme levels? And I think we're kind of waking up to that we need to pay greater attention to the demand side of the equation rather than just the supply side.
With massive budget cuts coming from the state, it'll impact law enforcement, it's going to impact healthcare, it's going to impact city government. How can we make a difference in addressing the alcohol problem if we're going to be losing all of this money to pay for it?
Well, one course of action is what we're doing right now, is having this type of discussion in a very public way with the media to let people understand that this really is a problem and why it's a problem. We found the same situation when we talked about domestic violence or when we talked about abuse of prescription drugs. A lot of people kind of heard about it but really didn't understand the significance of how much it's affecting our city. I mean, our city is one of the worst offenders in the state of Oklahoma in prescription drug abuse in the country. Top 15 out of 3,000 plus counties. Ours was the 15th worst. So when people understand that, and that catches their attention, and we get a panel of people that really represent a significant amount of our community saying, we need to do something about this because it hurts us, then people start paying attention. I think Dr. Clancy makes a terrific point, trying to address the demand. When we do have these budget cuts and we have all these problems, we have to put some things that are sacrosanct to that budget cut. And certainly this is the type of thing that by not cutting it, it will provide, in my view, a very, very strong positive result that helps all of us.
We have just about a minute left. Any last words from?
Well, I think the last thing would be, just like the mayor said, we have to be more strategic with how we do things. And these underage drinking parties address everything the mayor just said. These underage drinking parties also include drugs, sexual assaults, and all the other things that go along with it. So being strategic, identifying the real problems, and making sure we put our efforts at the real problem so that we're actually making a change with what we're doing. Education, those type of things, and the enforcement where we have to just make sure that everything we're doing is making an impact.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise. Panelists, thank you. I'm John Durkee.